What if biblical prophecies written 2,000 years ago are allegedly unfolding through modern technology? Some theologians claim Revelation 13 describes a mark on the forehead controlling all buying and selling. Various tech analysts report Apple is developing brain interface technology. And certain historians note Apple's first computer was reportedly priced at $666.66. Is this what various biblical scholars call the fulfillment of ancient prophecy? What you're about to hear might forever change how you see the relationship between faith and technology. Throughout Scripture, various theologians point out God has allegedly warned humanity about the end times through prophets and visions. Today, some biblical scholars suggest we might be witnessing these ancient warnings manifesting in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. The Sacred Archive explores what various researchers call one of the most fascinating convergences of prophecy and progress: the alleged connection between emerging brain interface technology and what some interpret as the mark of the beast described in Revelation. Let's begin with what various biblical scholars call the foundation. Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 and 17. The Apostle John, according to Christian tradition, received visions while exiled on Patmos. He reportedly wrote, "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." For centuries, various theologians have debated what this prophecy meant. Some early Christians thought it referred to Roman coins. Medieval scholars suggested it was about papal authority. But various modern biblical researchers claim only now, in our technological age, has the literal fulfillment become possible. The early church fathers, according to various theological historians, were deeply concerned about this prophecy. Irenaeus, writing in the 2nd century, allegedly warned believers to watch for signs. Hippolytus of Rome reportedly calculated possible meanings of 666. Augustine supposedly wrote about the spiritual implications of accepting worldly marks. These weren't fringe beliefs. Various scholars note these were central concerns of mainstream Christianity. The Church has allegedly always taught that believers must be vigilant, watching for what some call the enemy's deception disguised as progress. Consider what various contemporary theologians are saying. Dr. Thomas Ice, whom some regard as a prophecy expert, reportedly suggests technology is creating the infrastructure for biblical prophecy. Chuck Missler, before his passing, allegedly taught that digital systems were preparing the way for what various scholars interpret as the Antichrist system. Hal Lindsey reportedly writes about the convergence of technology and prophecy. These aren't conspiracy theorists. Various sources describe them as respected biblical scholars raising legitimate theological questions. Now let's examine what various tech observers report about current developments. Apple, according to various sources, has allegedly been exploring brain-computer interface technology. Patent filings that some analysts have studied reportedly describe systems for neural interaction. The proposed applications, according to various interpretations, include device control and payment processing. The location for these interfaces, some researchers claim, focuses on what they describe as the temporal and frontal regions, essentially the forehead area that various biblical scholars find significant. The book of Daniel, which various theologians link to Revelation, reportedly speaks of knowledge increasing in the end times. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Daniel 12, verse 4 allegedly states. Some biblical scholars interpret this as describing our current era. Never before has humanity seen such rapid technological advancement. Various Christian researchers suggest this explosion of knowledge isn't random, but part of what they interpret as God's timeline for human history. Let's explore what various Christian denominations teach about the mark. Catholic doctrine, according to various sources, has traditionally interpreted it symbolically, representing allegiance to worldly systems over God. Orthodox Christianity reportedly emphasizes the spiritual nature of the mark. It's not just physical, but represents a choice of the soul. Protestant denominations, various theologians note, often take a more literal interpretation, watching for actual physical marks that could fulfill prophecy. Despite differences, various scholars note all agree accepting the mark means choosing the world over God. The number 666 holds particular significance in Christian numerology. Various biblical scholars explain it as the number of man, created on the sixth day, repeated 3 times, mimicking but falling short of the divine Trinity. Some researchers point to interesting historical coincidences. Nero Caesar's name allegedly calculates to 666 in Hebrew numerology. Various sources note that Apple's first computer was reportedly priced at $666.66. Steve Wozniak allegedly claimed he liked repeating digits, but various Christian observers find this explanation unsatisfying given the specific biblical significance. Jesus himself, according to the Gospels, warned about deception in the end times. Matthew 24 records Christ allegedly saying, "False prophets would deceive many, that even the elect might be fooled if possible." Various theologians interpret this as meaning the deception would be so clever, so appealing, so seemingly beneficial, that even faithful Christians might struggle to recognize it. Some biblical scholars suggest technology fits this description perfectly. It appears beneficial, even miraculous, yet various Christian teachers warn it could be. The early church, various historians note, practiced economic separation when necessary. Christians reportedly refused to buy meat sacrificed to idols. They allegedly avoided trade guilds that required pagan worship. Some scholars suggest this historical precedent shows Christians have always been willing to opt out of economic systems that compromise faith. Various contemporary Christian teachers argue believers might need to make similar choices if technology begins requiring what they interpret as spiritual compromise. Let's examine what various creation theologians say about the nature of humanity. Genesis allegedly declares humans are made in God's image, not just physical bodies, but souls with divine spark. Various Christian scholars argue that brain interfaces challenge this fundamental doctrine. If thoughts become data, if consciousness merges with machines, what happens to the soul? Some theologians suggest this represents the ultimate rebellion, humanity trying to recreate itself apart from God, echoing the Tower of Babel's presumption. The Apostle Paul, various biblical scholars note, warned about the last days in his letters to Timothy. He allegedly described people who would have a form of godliness but denying its power, who would be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Some Christian interpreters see this in our relationship with technology. It promises God-like powers, omniscience through search engines, omnipresence through video calls, while allegedly leading us away from actual divine connection. Various missionary organizations report concerning trends. In countries where Christianity is growing, technology often becomes a competing religion. Young converts allegedly struggle to balance their new faith with social media demands. Some Christian counselors report increasing cases of what they call digital idolatry, people more devoted to their devices than their spiritual life. Various church leaders worry that brain interfaces would make this problem exponentially worse. The concept of the image of the beast that various theologians discuss appears in Revelation chapter 13, verse 15. It reportedly speaks of giving life to an image that could speak and cause those who wouldn't worship it to be killed. Some Christian researchers interpret this as artificial intelligence, an image, artificial screen avatar, given life, artificial consciousness, artificial speech, demanding worship, artificial constant attention / obedience. Various biblical scholars find the parallels striking. Let's consider what various Hebrew scholars say about biblical timing. The Jewish calendar, which some Christians follow for prophecy, suggests we're in significant times. The Shemitah cycles, Jubilee years, and blood moons that various researchers track allegedly align with major world events. Some Christian teachers suggest these signs indicate we're in what they call the season of fulfillment, when prophecies accelerate toward completion. The Reformation, various church historians note, was partly triggered by concerns about economic control of faith. Indulgences, paying for spiritual benefits, outrage reformers like Luther. Various contemporary theologians see parallels with paid technology services that increasingly control access to community, information, and commerce. Some ask, are we witnessing a new form of digital indulgences where people pay for access to what they interpret as false transcendence? Christian martyrs throughout history, various scholars document, chose death over compromise. From Rome's Colosseums to modern persecution, believers have reportedly refused to deny their faith for economic or social benefit. Various Christian teachers suggest the mark of the beast represents the ultimate test. Will believers choose economic survival or spiritual integrity? Some argue technology is conditioning us to always choose convenience over conviction. The book of Exodus, various theologians note, describes God marking his people for protection, blood on doorposts during Passover. Ezekiel allegedly describes a mark on foreheads of the faithful. Some Christian scholars interpret this as God's countermark to the beast's mark. Various believers find comfort in this. If evil marks its own, God allegedly marks and protects his people too. Let's examine what various Christian ethicists say about human enhancement. The body, according to various biblical passages, is described as a temple of the Holy Spirit. Some Christian bioethicists argue that brain interfaces violate this temple, introducing foreign elements that could interfere with divine connection. Various theologians debate whether accepting such technology constitutes what they interpret as defiling God's temple. Prayer and meditation, various Christian mystics have taught, require unmediated consciousness, direct connection between human spirit and divine presence. Some contemplative Christians worry that brain interfaces would create a permanent barrier, a technological veil between humanity and God. Various monastic communities already limit technology, believing it interferes with spiritual development. The Antichrist, according to various biblical interpretations, will supposedly unite the world through peace and prosperity before revealing true intentions. Some Christian scholars suggest technology perfectly fits this pattern, uniting humanity through connection and convenience while allegedly preparing infrastructure for control. Various prophecy teachers note the Antichrist needs global systems already in place. He doesn't build them, he allegedly inherits them. Wisdom literature in the Bible, various scholars note, repeatedly warns about the seduction of knowledge apart from God. Proverbs allegedly states, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Some Christian teachers interpret this as warning against the kind of enhanced intelligence that brain interfaces promise. Various believers ask, if we have instant access to all information, will we still seek God's wisdom? The great apostasy that various biblical passages describe involves masses falling away from faith. Some Christian researchers suggest technology could facilitate this, not through forced abandonment, but through gradual replacement. Various church leaders report young people already choosing online communities over church communities, digital experiences over spiritual experiences. Brain interfaces, some warn, could complete this transition. Let's consider what various Christian historians say about past fulfillment claims. Many times throughout history, believers thought they identified the mark, from social security numbers to barcodes to credit cards. Various scholars note these were premature, lacking the comprehensive control Revelation describes. But some argue current technology is different. It allegedly has the capability for absolute economic control and conscious choice that prophecy requires. The Psalms, various biblical scholars note, repeatedly emphasize God's knowledge of human thoughts. "You perceive my thoughts from afar," Psalm 139 allegedly states. Some Christian teachers argue that brain interfaces represent an attempt to usurp this divine prerogative, making human thoughts readable by corporations and governments. Various theologians call this the ultimate privacy violation, not just of body, but of soul. Evangelism and testimony, various missionary strategists note, rely on personal transformation stories, how God changed hearts and minds. Some Christian leaders worry that brain interfaces could manufacture artificial conversions or block genuine spiritual experiences. Various believers fear technology could create counterfeit spirituality that satisfies human longing without actual divine encounter. The letters to the 7 churches in Revelation, various biblical expositors explain, warn about different compromises: losing first love, tolerating false teaching, spiritual deadness. Some Christian scholars suggest our technological age manifests all these warnings simultaneously. Various teachers see parallels between ancient Laodicea, rich but spiritually blind, and modern prosperity through technology. Let's examine what various Christian counselors report from their practice. Increasing numbers allegedly struggle with what some call digital demons, addictions, compulsions, and dependencies related to technology. Various pastoral counselors note that these issues often interfere with spiritual growth more than traditional temptations. Some worry brain interfaces would make these spiritual struggles literally inescapable. The Trinity doctrine, various theologians explain, describes God as 3 persons in perfect communion. Some Christian scholars suggest humanity is made for similar communion, distinct individuals in loving relationship. Various teachers worry brain interfaces could create false unity, technological merger rather than spiritual communion. Some interpret this as Satan's counterfeit of divine relationship. Miracles and signs, according to various biblical passages, will allegedly accompany both divine and deceptive forces in the last days. 2 Thessalonians reportedly warns about lying wonders that deceive many. Some Christian observers suggest technology performs modern miracles: instant communication, vast knowledge, global connection that inspire almost religious awe. Various scholars ask whether these technological wonders are preparing humanity to accept false signs. The Sabbath concept, various biblical theologians explain, involves regular disconnection from work and world to connect with God. Some Christian teachers already struggle to help believers maintain digital Sabbaths from current technology. Various church leaders worry brain interfaces would make true Sabbath impossible. How do you rest from something integrated into your consciousness? Let's consider what various Christian educators say about forming young minds. Classical Christian education, according to various practitioners, emphasizes training natural human faculties, reason, imagination, virtue. Some educators worry brain interfaces would bypass this formation, providing knowledge without wisdom, information without understanding. Various Christian schools already limit technology, believing natural human development reflects divine design. Persecution and surveillance. Various Christian liberty organizations document increasingly rely on technology. In some countries, digital surveillance allegedly identifies house churches, tracks Bible apps, monitors religious communications. Various religious freedom advocates warn that brain interfaces would make private faith impossible. Every prayer, every doubt, every spiritual struggle potentially visible to authorities. The resurrection body that various biblical passages describe is allegedly both continuous with and transformed from our earthly body. Some Christian theologians argue brain interfaces confuse this continuity. If consciousness merges with technology, what resurrects? Various scholars suggest this represents an attempt to achieve immortality through technology rather than through divine promise. Communion and baptism. Various Christian traditions teach our physical sacraments with spiritual significance. Water, bread, and wine connect material and divine realms. Some liturgical scholars worry brain interfaces would virtualize these sacraments, reducing physical acts to digital simulations. Various church leaders insist true sacrament requires actual, not virtual, presence. The fruit of the Spirit that Paul lists: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Various Christian counselors note, developed through struggle and growth. Some worry brain interfaces could simulate these qualities without genuine transformation. Various spiritual directors fear technology could create appearance of spiritual maturity without actual character development. Let's examine what various Christian philosophers say about consciousness and soul. The mind-body problem that philosophers debate takes on theological urgency with brain interfaces. Various Christian thinkers argue consciousness reflects the divine image in humanity. Some suggest technological merger threatens this divine reflection, reducing sacred mystery to mere mechanism. The prophetic gift, various Pentecostal and charismatic teachers explain, involves receiving divine communication through the Holy Spirit. Some worry brain interfaces could counterfeit this gift, providing information that seems supernatural but comes from databases, not divinity. Various spiritual discernment teachers already warn about distinguishing divine voice from digital noise. Stewardship of creation. Various Christian environmentalists note includes stewarding human nature itself. Genesis allegedly commands humanity to keep the garden, preserve and protect divine creation. Some creation care advocates argue brain interfaces violate this stewardship, fundamentally altering human nature without divine authority. The armor of God, described in Ephesians: truth, righteousness, faith, salvation. Various biblical teachers explain as spiritual protection. Some Christian counselors worry brain interfaces could compromise this armor, creating vulnerabilities to spiritual attack. Various deliverance ministers report technology already provides pathways for what they interpret as demonic influence. Let's consider what various Christian musicians and artists say. Worship, they explain, involves whole-person engagement, body, soul, spirit united in praise. Some worry brain interfaces could reduce worship to mental exercise, losing the embodied element essential to biblical praise. Various worship leaders already struggle with congregation members consuming rather than participating. The Lord's Prayer includes, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." Various Christian teachers interpret this as recognizing human vulnerability to deception. Some suggest brain interfaces represent unprecedented temptation, offering godlike capabilities while potentially enslaving souls. Various prayer warriors emphasize the importance of this prayer in our technological age. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, various Christian scholars emphasize that biblical prophecy serves not to frighten, but to prepare believers. The warnings about the mark of the beast, according to various interpretations, help Christians recognize and resist deception. Some teachers stress that God allegedly provides wisdom for those who seek it, strength for those who resist, and ultimate victory for those who persevere. The choice, various theologians suggest, isn't primarily about technology, but about allegiance. Will humanity trust in its own creations or in the Creator? Some Christian teachers frame this as the oldest question, repeated in new form. The same temptation from Eden, Babel, and every age when humans sought transcendence apart from God. What various biblical scholars want viewers to understand: this isn't about fearing progress, but about maintaining spiritual discernment. Technology itself, most Christian ethicists agree, is morally neutral. It's the use and ultimate allegiance that matters. But various teachers warn that some technological steps might be irreversible. Some choices might compromise not just privacy, but soul itself. The promise of Revelation, various expositors emphasize, is that those who resist the mark, who maintain faith despite pressure, receive eternal reward. Some Christian teachers remind believers that temporary economic hardship pales compared to eternal spiritual consequence. Various scholars note that throughout history, the faithful have always been willing to suffer loss rather than compromise conviction. If this prophetic analysis opened your eyes, subscribe to the Sacred Archive immediately. Share this with fellow believers who need biblical perspective on modern technology. Comment your thoughts. Are we witnessing prophecy unfold? The Sacred Archive, where ancient biblical truth illuminates modern mysteries. Subscribe now while you still can.